in Restream?
Do I have them at?
No, I think you're good, but I went and mine sounded good, but it was on the wrong Dubiflaci.
In Restream? Okay, hold on.
Just want to make sure we got that good deep bass audio going on.
Echo cancellation, noise suppression, advanced options.
What you doing?
Who, me?
You going deep level.
Well, I'm just looking here. An echo.
Oh, here you go.
And I can put on stereo audio input.
You disappeared on us, man.
Am I back?
Nope.
What? Oh, no.
Your audio is gone.
Oh, no. Are you serious?
What'd you click?
I turned off. Can you hear me now?
No. Do you have Scarlett selected on your audio in Restream?
Yeah.
Yes. Is your computer or something?
Am I on the computer talking?
I don't know what you're doing.
Let me switch back. Hold on. Let me switch back. Sound preferences. Input. What about that? What about this?
Is it me?
What about this? What about this? What about this? Who does sound good? Who does it sound good?
Okay, hold on. You did something and it switched you. Hold on. Okay, say something.
1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
There we go. You click something?
Yeah.
And it changed it to my computer.
No.
I was in Facebook and you hit something and I was like, dude, you lost it. Where are you at? You're gone.
That is crazy. I went into so what I did was I went into the settings and I went to audio and I went to advanced options and I clicked off echo and noise and I clicked on stereo audio input.
I don't know what happened. You doing some
got like
voodoo witchcraft going on or something, man.
Hey, there's a deal on there says auto.
Clicking nothing.
No, I'm not. Auto gain control.
Right? Mine's on.
Yeah, me too. So that means like you can just be talking like this and you're really talking quiet. And then all of a sudden you get into it and it just kind of
high resolution audio. That
I just did.
All right, let's try it out and see what happens. Guinea pig today.
Why don't you guys test this in the show, whatever? You go live and then start testing. It's like that's what we do.
That's what we do, man. That's what we do. People already know.
Yeah.
People already know.
Ain't nobody surprised.
Nope, not nobody. I think I'm a little microphone's a little hot there. Sound a little funky.
A little distort on it.
Yeah, a little compression. Felt a little. Did you feel a little compression,
bro?
Compression pants.
I tell them, hey, people go from Under Armour compression pants to compression socks.
We're on our way, bro. We're on our way, man.
Yeah. When they get old, they get those compression socks that go all the way up to their kneecaps. It'd be like, yeah, but they're Under Armour compression socks.
That's right. I turned 50 this year, so I'm expecting some of those compression socks. So Under Armour only.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we ready?
Let's go.
We ready?
Yeah, man.
I think we're ready. Man, I'm having some allergy issues today. Ugh.
Give me a petting a cat?
Not a chance. Never.
Somebody snuck a cat in your house. One of the kids.
Bro. Cats are the bane of my existence.
You would walk out of your bedroom. It doesn't matter if they had a cat in the upstairs in their room with the door closed. You would walk out of your room and all of a sudden go like that and be like, who brought the cat in the house?
Dude, I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. It just proves my point that cats are demonic, but that's a whole different ball game.
For real. What is Mike Hanks dogging? Look, 50 equals prescription pants. What is this? Prescription pants. I went to the podiatrist and he prescribed me a pair of shoes.
Hey, funny
I
story, real quick.
didn't. I
Funny
didn't.
story, real quick before we get on here.
Yeah.
So
We're on here. We are
I
on
no,
here.
no, no. Before we're official,
I
but
just wanted to remind you that in case just not knowing what we're fixing to come with.
because you never know. So I've kind of become like I'm a little bit of a shoe guy. So I like shoes right now. I'm kind of in one of
Okay.
those little phases.
Uh-huh.
And so I got me some Cole Haans. I love
Oh, yeah.
Cole Haans, bro.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
me some Cole Haans, right? I like the
Yeah.
style, whatever. And I had an elder in our church come up to me and she said, Pastor, I just want you to know, I think it's so awesome that you're confident enough to wear those orthopedic shoes. I think that's so awesome. Bro.
Those because they have soles like a tennis shoe sole, and it's like, oh yeah. Because in their brain, it's like, yeah.
I was so broken, man. I was wounded in the house of friends. Holy cow, man.
What is a brand of orthopedic shoe?
Oh, Sketcher. Just offended a bunch of people
I
with
know
that
people
one.
like it. Wait. I'm wearing right.
There
Yeah.
will be no Sketcher uh
Yeah.
sponsorship of the Mobilized Church podcast.
Yeah.
Oh
Hey,
man.
I should we make available? I don't know if no, you can't do screen share. I started to say, should we make available our new brand ambassador? We better be careful.
No, let's not do that.
We better be careful. Our graphic designer, I'm just going to say it like this. Our graphic designer sent us a graphic last night for Dillingham Unscripted for our new brand ambassador. But I'll just say it was somebody that we've talked about in a previous podcast, but that's all I'm going to say.
We maybe should have named this podcast Dillingham Unscripted.
Well, that's the paid for subscription version.
Paid version.
People be like, dude, I would pay for that because if y'all are this crazy for free,
neither of us would have a license. It would be bad.
And pull us before the district board. You'd be like, we got your unscripted sucker. Come here.
Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do like a periodic podcast, Dillingham Unscripted, where we just go all in. We've already had a couple moments today where we're like, before we hit go live, let's say this. And so, yeah. So as a matter of fact, before we started, you were like, get that out of your brain. Get that out of your brain.
I know, right? Like, don't let that squish out.
It'll come out. All right. We ready?
Let's go.
Okay. Here we go. What are we talking about today? Oh, yeah, I remember. All right. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church podcast. This is Chris Dillingham alongside KGD Junior 3. That's what it says on the screen, bro.
God, I've got
Kid
it on
Dillingham Junior the Third, man.
I've gone ahead and accepted it. When it's like one of those deals when people give you a nickname in school, and they give you a nickname, and the best way, like, it's going to stick more if you avoid it and be like, no, that's not. Don't call me that, whatever. Then everybody will call you that. So just accept it. Which, I mean, I'm cool with KD Junior Third. If everybody who knows the people are like, I don't really understand that. It's like, yeah,
it's all good. It's all good.
You gotta go back in the archives to figure it out.
Absolutely. Nicknames. Do you know, in most of my life, I've never been called Chris my whole life. I've had a nickname my whole life.
It's true.
I was called, when I was growing up as a kid, there was a baseball player. His name was Sixto Lescano.
Oh, yeah.
And so my buddies in Odin, Illinois, Jeff Burton and the Spears brothers and all those guys.
I remember that.
They called me Christo. So I was Christo. And then
dude, that's exactly, I forgot that totally.
right?
Yeah.
And then I became Pickle. I was Pickle for my, like, junior high years,
Yeah.
and then
With the last name Dillingham, it's like, oh, real creative, guys.
right,
Yeah.
junior high name,
Yeah. Yeah.
figures.
Yeah.
And then my freshman year, I had a coach, and he didn't really say my name real clear, and so
Mhm.
my nickname became Cree,
He was a
and
brother. He was a
he was
brother.
brother. He's from East Side,
He's like, "Hey,
East St. Louis.
Cree."
And so one of the funny stories is he couldn't say my name. He called me Cree, and he said, "Hey, Cree, why they call you Cree?" It was hilarious, bro. It was so funny. So like,
Why they call you
"Why
Cree?
they call you
Why they call
Cree?"
you Cree?
And I said, "I don't know, coach. I have no idea." They were dying laughing,
But you might
man,
have something to do with it.
for real.
Chris,
So
my children
yeah,
call you Uncle Cree.
right. Right? It stuck, bro. Like, still to this day, any of my
Yeah.
high school buddies, they all call me Cree to this day.
Yeah.
It's been a long time ago. And then it became Dilly. So, bro, isn't it weird? It's like nicknames, dude.
Nicknames are terms of endearment for our closest friends.
Something like that. I think there's probably a few other nicknames that we're not
Mm.
aware of that people prefer to.
Put it on. Yeah. Eric Krupp says I've been called Rock, Kruppy, Krupster for real. And then what I want to do is put in the chat
Yes.
what you actually call us. Put that in the chat. Here's what we really call you behind your back. Go ahead and put that in the chat.
That's right. In my rap name, we played one of those games. I can't remember what the game was, but we played a game. You had to come up with your rap name if you're a rapper. And my name was K Dilly Funk Shizzle. So there you go.
K Dilly Funk Shizzle.
That's it, man.
That sounds like
my wife just put on there. She just put that on there. K Dilly Funk Shizzle.
Hey, man, listen. Shaquille O'Neal would come up with that name.
Right?
Like
Hummel will appreciate that. Hummel will appreciate K Dilly Funk Shizzle.
That is actually that's like a DJ name.
It is. That's my DJ name, bro.
Yeah.
So, oh man, we're off to a rocking start, dude. It's been a raucous. Is that the word raucous? It's been a raucous morning already today, man.
Right.
You might want to hit the share button because this show is going to go off the rails today. I feel it. We're already kind of running down that track. So, what do you think? Think we should go ahead and get rolling? I feel you.
Have we done 3, 2, 1? Welcome to the Dillingham. Are we still in pre-show? I don't remember.
It all just blends together, man. It all just blends together.
I think you did. Yeah, okay. All right.
I think we did it. I think
I
did it without air.
Wouldn't that be funny? It'd be like the perfect example of ADD. It's like
you forgot.
You do it twice. All right.
Let's go back and do it.
Hello,
again.
everybody. Welcome to the Dillingham. They're like, why did they do two intros?
It's like when you go up to somebody and you say, "Hey, how you doing?" They're like, "Good. How you doing?" And you're like, "I'm doing good. How you doing?" You ever have that moment?
Yeah.
You're like, "Can I say how you doing?"
Or somebody, the person hands you the meal, and they're like, a person hands you a meal and says, "Enjoy your meal," and you say, "You too." Like, oh, happy birthday to you.
Going through the drive-through. Enjoy your meal. You too.
Yeah. When you finally get your break.
Man, that's so funny. Woo, man.
That sounds like an episode from well, never mind.
That's Brian Regan. Brian Regan is the U2 guy. He's so funny, man. That's his comedy thing is the U2. I don't know how to use the U2 phrase.
Too.
All right, man. Oh, whew. So it's gonna be a good one. This is gonna be a good one today. I feel it. I feel it in my bones. You've been lighting it up since early this morning already. So this is gonna be the word of the day is raucous. Take luck. That's it. Take luck.
Yeah.
That's it. Brian Regan. Let's get rolling. Before we do, people hit the share button, man. Like, people are missing out on this great content. You know what I'm saying? Like they weren't here for this and they missed out on this great content, but that's
True.
okay. They can go back and watch it later, but you can hit the share button. And I put out today on Facebook, people might want to put the notifications on, Ken,
It is true.
because we have a tendency to maybe go a few minutes late.
Mm,
We have a tendency to maybe,
I plead the
we're not
fifth.
always right on at 10 o'clock. And so you might need the notifications, like, so you're not just sitting there waiting for it to happen. You know what I'm saying? So turn the notifications on.
True.
That'd be a good thing to do. So we're ready to rock and roll today. Let's get into the topic, into the discussion. It is going to be a serious discussion, even though
It's
we've been
so
a little
funny because
lighthearted.
it really is. I mean, but that's just we have a switch we flip.
We just flips.
And
It
I
just
think
flips.
I want to pretend like it's just sheer absolute professionalism, but the first 10 minutes that you've been with us has proved that wrong. So,
Absolutely. My wife just said we need a day off. She's not wrong.
bro,
I think we need a day of golf is what we need. That's what we need is a day of golf. We need a Dillingham group golf outing.
let's
Mm.
let's do that.
Let's do it. Who's
The
in?
Mobilized Church
Who's in?
Network Scramble.
Ooh, there you go. That's what I'm talking about.
Let's go.
All right. So today, let's get to the topic. Today, something I think is really important. And you came out of the gate this morning just dropping some bombs. And I want to get to I want you to at some point get to the deal about Barna, the comments from Barna, some of those kinds of things, whatever. But basically, what we're going to talk about today is we understand that we talk a lot about transformation, right? That's the I just saw Eric Krupp's message. I've heard Krupp he's on target to be on the senior tour. Is what I heard. It's what I heard. He's prepping to be on the senior tour. So I just want to be his caddy. That's all. I just want to be his caddy when he's on the senior tour. Right?
Let's go.
So let's do it. Yeah, for real. So today we're going to talk about transformation. And transformation, a central part of this process of moving from where we are to multiplication, personal transformation, all that kind of stuff, right? So one of the things is so critical, Ken, in this journey, this process, and this is for everybody, obviously for church leaders, not a dog church leaders podcast or, episodes, not what we're trying to do today. But what we have to recognize is this for anybody, the motive behind doing the things that we do is so vital and it's so critical, because how you find the win, what you determine is the win, is what you'll put your time and energy and effort towards, right?
It's very true.
And so in this journey, in this process, there are some things, some places where we get our affirmation from that can very easily pull us into some things that are not pure, and that can cause us to put our emphasis and focus on things that are not kingdom oriented, right? And so for example, we'll just throw out there. For example, you can have a desire. Early on in my ministry, I wrestled with this a lot. That I was very driven. I wanted to be successful. I was very driven, and so I wanted to have revival. I wanted church growth, whatever. But I looked at people as a product to get successful or to be successful.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And so even though it looked like what I was doing was kingdom minded or kingdom oriented, the reality is that at the root of it, there was a place in me that needed kind of that affirmation. And so today what we want to talk about is this tension that we have. And it's one of those things where some things you conquer and you completely overcome. And there's some things that you wrestle through this tension all the time, right?
Man, that's so true.
And I think this is one of those. Where if we don't let Jesus continually change what we care about and continually transform us, we can so easily be driven by how others perceive what is successful, right?
So
In
true.
every area of life. What we do, how we live our lives, all of those kinds of things can be driven by how people view us and how we view success. So I want to just throw it to you and let you kind of launch out in this conversation about kind of this tension of affirmation, why it's so critical and important.
That's so good. I think, you look at even John the Baptist and John's disciples. You know, the Bible, it's interesting in John chapter 3, later in the chapter there, in about verse 26 or so, it says, "So John's disciples came to him and said, 'Look, Rabbi, the one who was with you beyond the Jordan, the one you testified about, he is baptizing.'" And this last phrase, "and everyone is going to him." Right? Isn't that interesting that we have this passage of scripture,
Yeah.
John 3:26, where the disciples of John, and the message of John the whole time, by the way, right? John had settled his identity from the start, right? He knew what had been given to him by God to do, right? And yet, and he had testified there. Look, I'm not the end game here, right? There's one coming after me who's mightier than I. I'm not worthy to unloose his sandals. Um, he'd been very clear with that message. But even the disciples of John says, and I think this is interesting. They didn't have a problem with the fact that Jesus was baptizing. The problem was everyone's going to him. We're starting to lose some of our following and they're starting to go his direction. And I love John's response in
Right.
327. He said, "A man can receive only what is given him from heaven." And I believe that this is both that's both a discipleship answer and it's also a life goals answer, right? Um, so what John's basically saying is, look, he's talking about Jesus when he said a man can only receive what is given him from heaven, and so he may be talking specifically to his disciples, um, saying, if they're going to Jesus, then it's they've been given to him from heaven. Or he may be talking about his own minute. He could be talking about both. He may be saying, "Look, I can only do what heaven's plan is for me to do because," and I like his next verse, "you yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Christ, but I am sent ahead of him." Right? And so, I think John's not
Sure.
taken back by this idea that the disciples of John are really concerned with the fact that it appears that Jesus's ministry is taken off and outpacing John, and it's like, hey, his movement's getting bigger than our movement. It's just so weird, man, when you really look at those kinds of things that even in this very clear context where you're talking about John the Baptist and the greatest prophet that's ever risen, among the women, right? Or excuse me, among men, those born of women. Here's John the Baptist, greatest prophet of all times, according to Jesus, who has testified very clearly that he's sent ahead of the Messiah. And yet the disciples of John are at first blush pretty taken back by the fact that it appears like that this other movement is gaining more momentum than theirs. And so it just proves that there's this. I like to just sort of launch from that posture, because it causes us to not really look at it like, we're looking at, bad people and whatever. It's like, oh, why do you get your identity from all these other things? Here's an example where we come
Right.
from, a pretty powerful scriptural place where there's still this sort of inner drive to feel successful and feel like, hey, I've got the biggest thing in town. So,
Right. Absolutely, man. Yeah, and I think so as we kinda talk through this, obviously, I think initially, our immediate reflex goes to like talking to pastors, because this is why we talk about changing what the scorecard is and why that's important, because it's so easy for us to be measured by what is viewed as success out there, right? Like, Outreach Magazine, they do a story on the 100 largest churches in America,
Right.
right? And it's amazing how that in our culture, the size of Sunday attendance has been the very thing that has driven
Yeah.
us on this journey
Where's the
of
scorecard?
how we build our church, what we do, what we put right, the scorecard, right? And
Yeah.
so we put all of our energy towards that. And just speaking to pastors, I mean, I think this is a challenge for us that we have to kind of deal with consistently, because you'll see it on social media, you'll see it on like anything that's identified as like success, like how what pastors get and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of it's determined by how big of a congregation they have and all of that. And there is a tension sometimes that we can get pulled in that direction. And I think this is why. So I talk about transformation, changing what you care about, and this tension of affirmation. If your affirmation is that stuff, what
Mhm.
conferences you get asked to preach at, being viewed as the biggest church, put your energy and effort towards that. But if you not based on how big but measure based on how much lostness remains.
Yep.
And when that becomes the scorecard, then all of a sudden, now you have to allow Jesus to come in and begin to like it transform you in alignment with that is huge in all of us, that we constantly battle, we constantly face. That the truth is, places in us where we get our affirmation from places other than Jesus, other than his kingdom, other than the value system of the kingdom, and that will pull us away from the mission and for what he's called us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing about it is, as you talk about that, I think there's something that is um intrinsic to human nature. It's intrinsic to our fallenness. Um, it's intrinsic to, because it goes. I think a lot of this goes back to this original concept that the Bible said God gave. He invested His glory, His image, in Adam and Eve, right? And but later the Bible said all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, and so we've come short of that original intention. The identity of Adam and Eve originally was God placing his spirit, his identity, his image in them. Sin caused us to lose that image. Sin caused us to lose that glory. And so what happens is we see people that are very concerned with their self-image. And I think this is the thing that so I think when we think about this from a discipleship standpoint, we say, what do people do to improve or enhance or increase their self-image? And where does that come from? The need is to replace or restore something that was lost. I have an emptiness and I don't even know why. I've got a feeling or a sense that I'm not good enough. I don't measure up. I'm not all of that. What if,
Right.
I come from a poor family? We didn't have a whole lot, or I'm, whatever. And so what happens is whatever. And I think part of this is how people align, like even in, like we were talking about junior high school, whatever, where people end up aligning in these places where, they excel in athletics, or they excel in academics, or they people learn to highlight what they're good at, what they get accolades for, and sort of go after those things. Man, he's a really good athlete, or like, she's so good looking, or he's what a stud. He's so handsome. Look, and then so what happens is it's like you get your identity from, how many how many girls are flocking after you, how many guys are flocking after you, how cool you dress, and so all of these things are sort of embedded in the dysfunction of our brokenness and lost image, right?
Man, bro, absolutely. It's so true. Some great comments that are coming in, and Gary Gothard are kind of going down the same line. John's disciples felt the same tension. Jesus was getting glory, it threatens the kingdom. And then Gary Gothard said it's interesting, disciples were grappling with who's the greatest in the kingdom, and Jesus had to deal with that in his disciples. And so, this is not something that should surprise us that
Right.
these are things that we grapple, because we all wrestle with, we want to have meaning, we want our life to have meaning, we want to have purpose. And the way that, from a worldly standpoint, this is the whole value system of the kingdom. Jesus was turning that upside down. And Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, I came to serve. I didn't come to create a kingdom of this world. I didn't come to create a name in this world. I didn't come to, put my name in the same, like, lead, restore the kingdom of David in this world. Right. I came to serve. I came to lead a movement, all of that. And I think if we're being honest, all of us wrestle with that, is where do we get our purpose and our meaning, and doing something that leaves a lasting impression. We all wrestle with that, and we can't use the measurement of the world, right? We can't use the world's measurement of success
Right.
and the world's measurement of what looks like we've accomplished things to define that in the kingdom. I think that's really what we're kind of hitting at today, is anything that is outside of the value system is really in alignment with the world's definition of success.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think that's the thing where, what broken people do is they operate off of their brokenness, right? So, um, what broken people do is I think they look at situations, and we're all broken people, but what happens is we spend so much time, effort, and energy trying to bring to the surface and highlight what we're good at, what we achieve. How do we take our good performances and make that central to who we are? How does that become sort of the epicenter of who we are? And so then what we do is we try to build off that. We try to enhance that. We try to improve those kinds of things. And what that does is, not only does it make us feel better about ourselves, but it causes our sense of self-worth to increase. And when our self-worth increases, then we have more confidence. And so I think this is the whole self-help, kind of genre.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, Chris. One of the things that we've talked about is this idea of how that sometimes in the way the world looks at it is, we look at it like, you're not this, you should be more this. So go do this better, be that better. What's so interesting is that there's this concept in the scripture where God actually comes along and says, he actually flips this whole script, right? Instead of saying, you're not enough of this, you need to be more that, go work on being better at that. God actually does it in reverse. The question that we should ask is, who is God? What has he done? Who am I because of what he's done? How then should I live? That actually flips everything around. So then, rather than us, this gets into people becoming self-righteous. This gets into people sort of justifying themselves, so justification's a biblical concept. Why do people enter into self-justification? Why do people enter into self-righteousness? Why do people, because it's us trying to, from our perspective, get up to where we should be. Well, Jesus comes along, he gets us to where we should be by his perfect life. And then redemption turns everything upside down and says, okay, so instead of living earth up, you're going to live heaven down. So this is the value system of the kingdom. Who is God? What has he done? Who am I because of what he's done? How then should I live? It changes everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think this is where something the Lord with me here recently was, not God used like the ambition and drive of Peter, right? He had the drive, he had the boldness when Jesus used that. And so, what we're not saying is we're not saying that God wants us to be passive, that God wants us to not do anything or to attempt things. Actually, just the opposite.
Mhm.
I believe in the greater things than these shall you do, and I believe God wants us to do that. What we're saying is this: this is what the Lord dealt with me not long ago. Was the doing is not bad. It's not inherently bad, right? Doing, but doing without the being piece is
Yeah,
where you get what you're talking about, where
yeah,
it becomes self-justifying, it becomes self-elevating, it becomes
right.
self-righteousness. But if it's anchored, the being piece is the anchor, right? It anchors us to the truth and the reality that without him, I can do nothing.
There you go.
And what I do is fully for his kingdom. And that's why, you know, John was the greatest. So we start out with that conversation. John was the greatest of all the prophets because John said, at the end of the day, I'm not worthy to carry his shoes. I have a job and responsibility. And at some point, I'm going to be out of the way and let him do it. That's the essence of what God has called us to be. And that is to be everything that he called us to be. I'm still going to be very driven. I still want to do a lot of things in the kingdom. I still want to accomplish a lot of things in the kingdom. And don't you think this is the very essence, Ken, of faith without works is dead, right?
Yeah,
Paul said,
yeah,
"You say that you have your faith," or James said, "You have your faith, but I'll show you my faith by what I do." And so I think this is we live in such an anti-works culture that oftentimes that's where we kind of lean towards is like, well, works are bad. And that's not really the truth. The works have to be anchored in that faith piece. If the works are anchored in the faith piece, the motives will stay pure. The affirmation will only come from, I want to hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant, the Lord. That has to be the motive of everything we do.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think that's sort of what you might say the result of the transformation. It's kind of Paul's message in Romans. Um, Paul's message in Romans was, you know, the law wasn't unrighteous, the law wasn't bad. The law just demonstrated that the thing that we should be doing, we can't do. So
Sure.
New Testament transformation, New Testament salvation, that produces in us the ability to be, which is Paul's whole idea there, right? In Romans 5, 6, 7, and 8, is that to as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become sons of God. And so we can't
Sure.
accomplish sonship. We can't arrive at those places. And so, I think, man, I just think it's so important that I'm gonna pull a couple of these statements up. I love,
Yeah, I was gonna
uh,
have you see if you could address that.
yeah. So I like Gary Gothier says it's so interesting that many times the disciples were grappling with who was the greatest in the kingdom, right? Something Jesus had to deal with his own disciples. I think it wasn't really until they saw the cross, they saw the deep punishment that Jesus was willing to endure. The cross became this thing, I think, where the disciples looked at the cross. James and John, let me sit on the right hand and left hand of your kingdom in glory, and he says, like, if you're willing to drink the cup that I drink. I think that they didn't even really fully comprehend. They just thought that they had hitched their wagon to a star. And eventually what happens is Jesus is like, you're really not going to get this until two critical things happen. Number one,
Yeah.
until you see the gruesomeness of the cross, and until that the results of the cross affects you personally and causes the crumbling of your self-identity and your kingdoms. You see what it's going to take. The only perfect one that's ever lived suffers the defeat of our sin and unrighteousness on our behalf, and it's gruesome and it's horrible and it's painful to see. and yet that resurrection comes to dwell in us. Which comes along to what Jay Jones said, we will always try to fill our own buckets. The problem is when we try to fill them with anything but Jesus. And man, Gary Gauthier, the social media craving for likes and shares. Um, you know, John Hummel, by trying to validate our brokenness, we actually contribute to what broke us. So I think this is so powerful when we look at these kinds of things, and it's crazy because sometimes if you don't look at these things, if you don't dig into it in the deep place,
Yeah,
what
right.
what happens is that we can be actually even involved in God's stuff. We could be church members, we can be
Bro.
department leaders, we could be pastors. You know what? You could literally be, you could literally be a leader or a pastor and be in a position where you want to be, your position validates you. And so what happens is you want to be the expert. I don't need anybody to tell me. And it could lead to this independent mindset, this autonomous mindset. Like, you know what? I'm not going to let, somebody else may have some kind of a level of expertise in some area, but it's like, well, I don't need anybody. Where does that come from? Like, where does it come from that leaders could even be vulnerable to this idea of trying to be like independent and autonomous? And I don't, you know,
Yeah.
because that position and that authority, if
And
it's not done
bro,
right, can
and
can
truthfully,
yeah,
I think that is a dangerous place
right.
to be, and I think so you give that aspect of it, right? Like where, and we've seen it happen where when ministry becomes like being the CEO of an organization, or becomes like a business, and it's kind of run through that filter.
So good.
Obviously there's some business aspects to running a church, but when it becomes just a business or just a CEO like that, and then you have people that are a part of the church or whatever, for whatever reason, wherever the affirmation comes from, whether it's because it's like an expected thing, or it's become a cultural thing. And the danger is, Ken, of course this is probably anecdotal,
Yeah.
but my experience has been, when you get this in people that are living it that way, at some point, right, there's cognitive dissonance, and at some
Mhm.
point it actually turns people away from the kingdom. And this is where we've
Mhm.
seen prominent church leaders come out as atheists,
That's crazy,
right?
right?
Isn't that weird? Like people that have written books and preach conferences, and people that have lived in church, been a part of the church for their whole lives, or whatever, and come out, well, I don't really believe that, whatever. And you're like, where did that come from? Well, it's because they're doing something, and somewhere in them there was this place of what we're talking about today,
Yeah.
where
Mhm.
they were doing it for another reason, whatever that
Yeah.
motivation was.
Wow.
And so it actually, I think it's an extremely dangerous place. And this is why we're
Yeah.
so passionate about the need for transformation, for radical transformation in us, that we can't do it. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Not just do these things out of duty or responsibility, or because of cultural norms or whatever. You do it out of, it's got to be birthed out of love. I wonder if you would share kind of what you shared earlier this morning with me, Ken, about uh, the deal from
Mhm.
Barna,
Yeah.
and all of that, about the direction of Christianity, and then what Barna had to say about that.
Yeah. The it actually comes from it actually comes from the book Transformational Discipleship. We mentioned I had a copy of
Yeah,
that book, and it was one of our pastors that's in our think tank group, in our text group, had mentioned this earlier this morning in a different context. And I was going back through and looking at it, and it said he was talking about that there's this idea that people. So he's talking about how the people said, that they had experienced salvation, and it says, and he said, and I quote, and yet with this significant percentage of professed Christ followers, there's a lot of hand wringing among Christian leaders about the spiritual state of American culture. I am suggesting that the lack of Christian influence on culture is a direct result of the lack of depth of transformative discipleship. And then he goes on to
Yeah.
say, still quoting, Barna has sadly concluded, my research shows that most Americans who confess their sins to God and ask Christ to be their Savior live almost indistinguishable from the unrepentant sinners, and their lives bear little, if any, fruit for the kingdom of God.
That's not us. We didn't say that.
No, that's that.
That's what Barna said.
Right. What happened is Ogden in this book, he is commenting on some Pew research and some Barna research stuff. He's commenting on that, and he's saying that, man, that there's leaders that are saying, why aren't we making an impact on culture? Why is Christianity, even the missional efforts of Christianity, why has it almost sort of hit a standstill? Why has missional progress almost halted? And he says, the author of this book, Ogden, he says, yet with this significant percentage of professed Christ followers, right? In other words, I think the number was 70. He was quoting maybe Barna. 76% of people say that they are Christ followers or fundamentally evangelical or whatever. And it says, yet there's a lot of hand wringing among Christian leaders about the spiritual state of culture. And this is what he says. I am suggesting, this is the author, I'm suggesting that the lack of Christian influence on culture is a direct result of a lack of depth of transformative discipleship. So then he says, and Barna even concludes in his own words, right, that even those who claim to be Christians live almost indistinguishable from the unrepentant sinners. And there it is. In other words, so what is the point? When they see, and we got to think about this for a second, Chris, and I just want to point this out and throw this back at you. I don't know that what Barna is saying here, I don't think he's saying when he says that you live indistinguishable lives. I mean, he may be referring to, drinking and carousing and partying and, doing all these things. He may be referring to that, but that's not actually the context of he's actually saying if you read before this, they're saying that there's a lot of people who say that they're Christians, but even among those who claim that they have experienced a salvation experience and that they claim that they are fundamentally Christian, are still not being effective. Barna is not referring to, man, I don't want to get too, Barna is not referring to the Hollywood types who are in R-rated movies that are saying, I just, at the Grammys, I just want to thank God for this opportunity, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
He's not referring to those peripheral Christians. He's referring to these people that would say that they're closer to the center of Christianity. And I think what Barna is saying is that there's a lot of reason for Christians, not just that they're living immoral lives, but that in many ways, their sense of identity, their sense of accomplishment, their drive for financial security, all of those things differ it's almost indistinguishable from their unsaved counterparts in their neighborhood and their workplace.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And maybe we're reading into it just a little bit, but I agree 100%. I don't think he's talking about, like you said, wild parties and carousing and whatever. Is that carousing? That's kind of an old word, isn't it? Bless God, out carousing, doing all that kind of stuff. I just went really old. Well, that's my orthopedic shoes and my compression socks. So getting rid of prescriptive socks. But I think it's 100%. I think the biggest part of that is this idea and the concept of pursuit of the American dream, a lack of understanding about sacrifice, all of those kinds
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
Those things are anathema to a person who looks at it and says, well, I want to be successful. And so if God says, well, I want you to sacrifice and give up whatever that, career, we look at that and like, I don't want to do that because then I don't have the money. I don't have the houses. I don't have the cars. I don't have all this kind of stuff. And that's how I'm identified what success looks like, bro. This right here, I think is so critical. And I think it's so important. We've kind of addressed it from the level of leadership, but I think what we're talking about right here is so critical, is everyday believers, every single believer has to experience this transformation, that what's most important to Jesus becomes, and how he defines my
There
life
it
as a
is.
success is
There it
what
is.
is successful. For some, it's going to mandate and require radical sacrifice and giving up things, in our own lives, bro, in our own lives. Before we even talked about this discipleship stuff, God challenges us to give up things the way we were defined before, which was
Right.
success in sports,
Right.
right? Both of us were uh, raised in such a way that success in sports dictated and determined a lot about your identity, about your social status, all of that kind of stuff. And God walked both of us through this place that said, look, in my personal experience with baseball, right? My whole life was built around I wanted to play baseball at the highest level I could possibly play at, whatever that was. And God brought me to a place that said, are you willing to give that up for me? It was more than just giving up baseball. And I don't know that I really realized it in that moment, Ken, but
Yeah.
it was really about, are you willing to give up your identity? Up how people look at you as a success, and how culture and society looks at us as a success. And I think that's what we're talking about there with that Barna thing, is that indistinguishable lives, is we're pursuing the same things as people that are not Christians. We're giving ourselves to the same things that people are not Christians giving themselves to. And that's going to lead to, ultimately, that's going to lead to frustration. It's going to lead to this contention with the Lord. There's that, and that's why we said the tension of affirmation. God is going to bring us to a place where there's tension in this area, and we're going to have to deal with that.
Man. Somebody once told me, I'm going to try to get this quote right. An idol is something that you go to when you're in pain or seeking pleasure. That interesting? An idol is something you go to when you're in pain or when you're seeking pleasure. And it's so when you're in pain, meaning, your crops aren't, old idolatry, right? Our crops aren't going well. We're not experiencing this, that, and the other. And so they go to the idol and try to get favor and or to experience. An idol is something that you go to when you're experiencing pain or pleasure. I like what, Jay Jones just said, even benign tumors. He was a guest on our podcast last week. He said even benign tumors look like tumors. It's a tumor. It's just the inability to change the cells around them. And I think that being benign, something that's benign,
Right,
right?
ineffective. It doesn't do anything.
We want malignant Christianity. Jesus said that, right? I know that's I know malign is it's not a good word. I mean, it's negative at face value, but
Well, it's like
Jesus,
contagious Christianity. That
right?
didn't work real well when we were going through
Viral,
a pandemic.
yeah,
We want a
right.
viral.
Viral, yeah. We want this to go viral, and people are like, but during COVID. But I think this is the thing where I think that it's important for us to recognize that Jesus said, "What shall I like in the kingdom of heaven?" It's like a woman who hid leaven inside 3 measures of meal until the whole lump was leavened. In other words, this is the whole salt losing its savor. This is the whole idea that leaven, what good is yeast if it doesn't have the ability to multiply and reproduce itself throughout the whole,
Bro,
it's
this is such a needful conversation.
yeah,
He ended that statement by saying they're not bearing the fruit, which
that's
is
right.
what we're talking about right here, right?
That's exactly right.
Benign Christians. We unfortunately have a culture of benign Christianity. So how do
That's
we
what it
change?
is. It's benign. Well, you know what? I think it goes back, and this is interesting because I think it goes back to what we originally started talking about. and that is your values will determine your scorecard.
We changed this idea of benign Christianity.
So like
Good,
your
sorry.
values change your scorecard. And so if your values are if your values are worldly, all right, and if, in other words, if your values are based on the dysfunctional system of the world, I think this is so huge because, um, you know, when we look at, let me say it like this: when we look at the things that we've talked about, when we're talking about like this deep sense of dysfunction or this problem that people have sometimes with their self identity or whatever. So if your values are built off of the world's way of getting identity, getting success, if the world says this is the way you're valuable, this is the way that you're considered successful, this is the way that you get security, whatever. Okay, so if you're a Christian and you've experienced this is, and there's a statement that said in this book, it said, unfortunately, it appears that modern Christianity is good at making converts, but not good at transformation.
Whew.
And I think so. So here's
Wow.
the deal. So your scorecard is what tells you if you're winning.
Right.
So what do you build your scorecard off of? You build your scorecard off your values. If you've got Christians who are still playing to the scorecard that's based upon the world's values, then there will neither be personal transformation, nor will there be effect on that change of others. In other words, when people look at the lives of a person who's a Christian and all they see is that, well, they went to church and they experienced something and they, whatever, and they claim now that they're a Christ follower or whatever, but they look at their life and they go, you're not living any different than me.
Yeah.
No, we're not talking about sin. We're not talking about, that they're going out carousing, to use your word, but literally that their life motivation, their life ambition, in other words, their scorecard. If they look at it and go, look, your scorecard's the same scorecard as my scorecard. The difference is where you spend your Sundays.
Yeah. Yeah.
I spend my Sundays at the lake. You spend your Sundays at the church, but our scorecard's the same scorecard. Why do I need what you've got?
Hashtag tension.
Right.
Absolutely, man. I think that's 100%. And I think, what did Jesus call people to do? If you're going to be a follower of me, right? It's more than just receiving what I can do for you. It's take up your cross, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow after me. Lose your identity. Paul said, I'm no longer my own. Paul listed all of the things and said, those things that used to identify who I am as a success, what did Paul say? Those things now, I consider those like dookie.
Yeah.
Can I say dookie?
Yeah.
I just said dookie. I've left all of those things behind because those things don't define me anymore. They don't. I'm sure Paul, went through this deal of like his whole life had been geared towards accomplishing those things. But when he came in contact with Jesus, none of those things had any influence on him or impact on him because now he's no longer, his only identity is, I'm not my own, but I've been bought with the price. And so I've given myself totally and completely to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to, Chris, maybe as we start, we're coming up on the hour mark here, but I think as we really think through this, I think as you go back to John, we talked about John's disciples, just by way of summary. John's disciples said, Jesus is gaining more disciples. They're getting momentum. Everybody's following him now. And, this idea that we can only get that which is given to us from heaven. And I think that if our perspective is if we feel like there's an alternative to get what we need, right? If there's an alternative to get what we need somewhere other than heaven, if there's another earthly way, if there's another cultural way, and Chris, sadly, the culture could be church culture. You know what
Sure.
I mean? I mean,
Absolutely.
we can actually get from church culture what we should be getting from Jesus, right? There were still disciples of John that were measuring their success and effectiveness by how many were following them. And when there were more people following Jesus, it confronted their effectiveness. And John swung them back to this you know, what's the word in when calibrating
Yeah.
concept. John swung them back into this calibrating concept. We can only get that which is given to us from heaven. And so, what was given to John from heaven to be the forerunner? That's his next words. My purpose, my cause here is to be a forerunner. The last little piece that I'm going to give and throw it back to you to close this down. My
Sure.
last little thing is, the question that I posed this morning was, if we measure ourselves among ourselves, okay, if we measure ourselves among ourselves, what we may do is we may say, I'm successful if I have raised up, if I've produced, right? I
Sure.
produced 1,000-member church.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. Is that measure of success given to you from heaven? Was that measure of success given to you by institutional comparative Christianity? I want to be the
Right.
biggest church. I want to be the biggest church in town. I want to be the biggest church in the district. I want to be the big whatever. Okay. But what if, okay, let's say that's your goal. And let's say you arrive at that goal. You do, I mean, you go to the leadership conferences and you go figure it out, and you go and you produce systems and programs and perfect it to the point where you've actually had the leadership skills to amass 1,000-member church. But what was actually given to you from heaven was to raise up 10 leaders that all produced 500-member churches. And I know we're still talking about membership as the scorecard, which is, I know I'm breaking every rule by doing that. But what I'm saying is that even at the end of the day, the wrong paradigm produces the wrong outcomes. If God said, I actually was going to have you invest in these 10 people that were all going to raise up 500-member churches, you've actually
Right.
been,
Right.
even though you're satisfied with your success of 1,000-member church, you're actually only 1/5, 20% as successful as God actually, what heaven wanted you to do.
So good, man. I wanna end this. I wanna read a comment from Pastor Jeffrey Glick from San
Okay.
Mateo, California, San
Uh-huh.
Francisco area. He said this. He said, "We're only changed into his likeness through daily relationship discipleship. Otherwise, we simply try hard from a fleshly effort. In his presence, we lose our carnal insecurities and come before his throne of grace with increasing confidence. This is the place of liberty. It's here we're transformed into his image from one degree of glory to another as we behold the glory of the Lord in the face of Jesus." And I like this part. Here we find freedom from the tyranny of insecurities and a marred self-image.
So
And
good.
bro, that's so good. I think that
There it is.
really sums up and wraps up what we've been talking about. And this is why personal discipleship is so critical. Getting alone with God, being conformed into his image, let him transform and change those places. And I think he's exactly right. I think a lot of that is the tyranny of our insecurities, our
Mm.
self-image, all of that kind of stuff. So great stuff today. We appreciate everybody being a part of the conversation. Uh, it's been a tough day. It's been a tough day for us because we had a storm come through last night, Ken, and I
Hmm.
think it's affected our internet, and we have
Yeah.
battled through major internet issues. So we appreciate everybody kind of sticking with us, and we
Yep.
appreciate this episode might be a little bit choppier than normal, and we certainly apologize about that. We appreciate you hanging with us and being on here today. So it's been a tough deal on my end as far as internet. That's bad. That's a bad deal for two guys with a. It's
Yeah.
it's hard
It does make it tough. And right now, as we are closing
to
down
appreciate
the podcast, it's doing it right here, right now. It's doing it.
doing
It's
right now.
yeah,
Let's do it right now. Oh, stupid.
yeah.
stupid. So it was this out. Appreciate everybody being a part today. We look forward to coming back to you next week, hopefully with better internet connection. It'll be sometime around 10 o'clock, and hopefully it's much better. So love and appreciate everybody. We look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, go live mobilized.